you all for attending this workshop on advocacy and actions. I appreciate you being here. By the time you've completed this hour, we hope you will have finished at least one action. 2 actions should be easy, and we will have more ideas on other actions you can follow through with in the following week. All of this might help to build a habit of advocacy. Actions for climate restoration with time. We believe that advocacy is like a muscle that needs to be worked out to become stronger and easier to use on a regular basis. We encourage you to use 2 apps on your phone to help add to your habitual advocacy. The UN Act Now app is great for those listening in from our international audience. And for daily reminders of actions in the US, we have the Climate Action Now app. Which is a great aid in helping your advocacy get a kickstart into a higher gear. By doing these simple daily actions, our hope is that it will stimulate your advocacy actions in the future. We have 3 amazing and very productive chapter leaders from our teams who will give you stories about their experiences in leading a chapter to success. Let me first introduce you to Mike Robinson of the Pacific Northwest chapter.
Hi, Mike Robinson here. I got involved in climate restoration, actually, in an unusual way, I suppose. My work is in entrepreneurship with universities, and one of the projects I was working with was a novel direct air capture technology, and that got me interested in the space. And from there, I started learning about it and got connected to the foundation, and all of a sudden, before you know it, I'm doing advocacy, which is a whole new thing for me. But along the way, I got connected with a lot of amazing people, and in particular, decided to pull together a group of people on the West Coast who are members of the foundation or of Open Air Collective or of various other organizations. And together, we've made a group called packclean.org, Pacific Coast Legacy Emissions Action Network. It's a real mouthful, but we had to have something that sounds good. And so Pack Clean is essentially a all volunteer club of people up and down the West Coast who are pushing for state and local action, state and local policies to foster climate restoration. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mike. I'm always fascinated to hear about Pack Clean. I put the link for Pack Clean in the chat for you if you're wondering and you want to look at more about what he's talking about. Now let me introduce Melanie. Melanie Trent, who is our Colorado team leader and specialist in understanding decarbonizing policy, I think, from our team. She will explain the successes that Colorado State has had lately.
Thanks, Terry. I appreciate that. Can you all hear me? Excellent. Well, I don't work at the university. I'm not an engineer or a scientist, but I am a constituent and a concerned citizen. And over the last several years, I've just informed myself on with lots of online resources that have the latest and greatest information on CDR, on climate restoration through the foundation here. And I got those links through engaging here with the Foundation for Climate Restoration. I live in the mountains in Colorado. It's quite a remote area with a real low population density all around me. And I do not have a regular group of people who meet ongoingly, which is such a frustration initially. Even online has been a challenge in moving forward, but what I have developed is this amazing group of people who are contributing however they can. And I reach out to them with specific things that are going on, and I was just willing to take the lead because it's important to me as far as bringing folks together. In collaboration with other organizations, primarily I would say Open Air, which I'm sure you've all been hearing plenty today, and other local organizations as well, to make the connections around the state of Colorado and kind of get the lay of the community and engage with that through Zoom, which has been great since I'm so remote. with the foundation, we had an outline for mobilization. There was a slide deck that I could work with that was easy for me to tweak. We share resources, tweak for the needs here specifically. And also a lot of support around policy advocacy, which is brand new for me, along with Mike. Also, similar support in meetings and informing the public, which I really love to do. So lots of resources available if you're just willing to engage and make use of them. And what I found is that the state legislators were really eager to work on policy, open to meeting. We had 2 bills that passed this session, a carbon management bill that does 2 things. One's a roadmap that will include a lot of public input, and we're really looking at what methods of CDR are going to be right for our state. And it also has a provision for grant monies from existing industrial grant pot that's here to include CDR. We met with the primary energy staff for both the federal House of Representatives and also with our senator to talk about the CDRLA. If any of you, that's the Carbon Dioxide Removal Leadership Act, if any of you heard Representative Tonko speaking about that. And we found that they were just very receptive and interested in moving the conversation forward, and it's been quite rewarding. Thanks so much. And what I would say is there's ways to have an impact, and we have a brief window of time to work on this. And so it's essential to get in action now. Thanks.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you for sharing your perspective with us. It's always exciting to hear from you. Our last chapter leader to speak will be Dick Schoitzau of Central New York. Dick has been very strategic and thoughtful in his buildup of a chapter. Please, Dick, share with us your own CNY story.
Thanks, Terry. I appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody being here. I'm going to get right into it. I am involved with the Citizens Climate Lobby, CCL, here in Central New York, as well as through the Catholic Church in the diocese in Syracuse. Again, we are in the central part of New York State, and that is why our chapter is called F4CRCNY, Central New York. So here's my story. In the 70s in high school, I read Rachel Carlson's book, Silent Spring, and it confirmed for me that others recognized the ecological risks of our industrial age that I thought were obvious. I also learned that I think in systems, as do many others. I was raised in the Jesuit tradition of the Catholic faith and have sung in choirs my whole life, but the patriarchal God of my faith didn't jive well with my systems thinking, so I sang and that was it. Then in 2015, the Catholic Church did something radical because of all the problems that the church had. It brought in a Jesuit priest, which is in fact radical. He took the name Francis, the patron saint of ecology, Francis of Assisi. So I began to listen. Then in 2015, shortly after he was installed as Pope, he issued an encyclical called Laudato Si on care for our common home. This changed me, and I became an environmental activist within my diocese and a student of climate change. Through this process, numerous iterations of different things. A year ago, I came across and read Peter Fikowski's book, Climate Restoration, and this led me ultimately to F4CR. Again, the obvious became apparent to me that net zero by 2050 is absolutely necessary, but that just turns off the tap in order to reverse the effects of climate change that we are all actively experiencing now at 420 parts, that we need to empty the tub and return atmospheric CO2 to pre-industrial levels by 2050 as well at the same time. And folks, that's a really big lift. I also read Katharine Hayhoe's book, Saving Us, which helped me realize that to move hearts and minds to an ecological conversion is not more scientific fact, but instead we need more human connection. And I say this very sincerely through my experience within the Catholic diocese. Nobody talks about climate change, and it's taboo to do so from the pulpit. And people want to talk about it. And the way to do that is simply to get together and talk about it. And that's using the Katharine Hayhoe model. Let's talk about it. So I did something really clever. I started a chapter with Terry's help. In January, we established a local grassroots chapter here in Central New York of F4CR. I wrote an op-ed piece published in the local news media that invited people to join us, which initially yielded 18 people. Then on March 5th, we hosted an informal discussion at a local brewery just to try this thing out. And it was titled, Let's Talk About It. It was attended by only 13 people, but it became quite apparent that this model is very effective, and this is what our communities are looking for. So we have decided that this is the model we're going to continue to use with the platform of the Foundation for Climate Restoration. So we bring people together, we're able to talk about this topic, which people want to talk about. They may not realize it, but they do talk about it. But also it's to give hope, to give the message that F4CR has that we can fix, at least not the biodiversity loss, but we can fix the CO2 issue, but we have to do it by thinking big and get it done by 2050. It became very clear again that this model was effective. Since then, there's something that has happened I want everybody to be aware of. And last October, YouTube released a documentary called The Letter, and it is done with the Catholic Church by the Pope, where he invited 4 people to come together that represent youth, indigenous, the poor, and wildlife. It is very, very moving, and it has been very effective. So we've taken our Let's Talk About It model, married it up with that, and we have since had 4 public screenings here in Central New York where we watch this 86-minute documentary, and then we have a session called Let's Talk About It. And it's been very effective, and we're going to continue to do that. So I'm over my time. That is what we're doing in Central New York. It's very grassroots, but is proving to be a catalyst for people to talk about what their concerns are. Now what we have to do is provide them actions for advocacy actions going forward so that they can have agency and do something about this. Meanwhile, we'll continue to invite more Central New Yorkers to Let's Talk About It. Grateful for your time, folks. Thank you so much.
Could I have you bring up one more thing? I know that it's okay with time. You had an interesting situation with your Let's Talk About It, where there was a climate denier.
Yeah, actually, I saw him again last night. It was very interesting. I worked very hard to get this gentleman to join us. He did. I was surprised. He kept quiet for, we scheduled for an hour and a half. Again, it was a pilot. Some people were there 4 hours. But this gentleman finally was encouraged, was the only person that wasn't part of the choir, if you will. And finally, he was encouraged to speak, and he did. And he spoke with some anger about his economic circumstances because of the cost of this conversion to renewable energy, which is what I do for a living. But he got it out. And then when he left, he said goodbye to everyone. He was the first person to leave. And he was greeted by the other 12 people there with, "Hey, Bill, thanks for being here." And he felt validated. And now he is more open to the message that, yes, we have to take care of this problem. And what we have to do is bring people together. What's interesting is he's a local cameraman for our news media. And he's been coming to me and saying, "Hey, here's some things that we can talk about." So very positive.
I think that's a really relevant point. One of the best things about F4CR is our idea that there are no enemies on this path. And I loved Dick's story. I was absolutely spellbound when he told me about that particular situation, because it's such an important thing to understand that not everybody agrees with us, and that really heartfelt conversations include listening. And you guys were a perfect example of that. And I think that that's something we try to do in the entire organization. And I'm sure it will be perpetually done with the volunteers. Thank you so much, all 3 of you. We really appreciated hearing about it. I still wanted to hear more about Mike, because there's an actual number he can give us about how much he's helped Washington State embrace carbon dioxide removal. You want to squeeze that in real quick?
Sure. Well, so this session is about local action. And so I got involved with F4CR and opened up the Pacific Northwest chapter. And then that has kind of morphed into Pat Clean. But right away, we started working on legislation in Washington. And a year and a half ago, I had never talked to an elected official. Had never sought anybody out, had never done advocacy. But actually, with Terry's help, I found out it's not so hard. It's that they're just people. They just have a job to do, right? They want the input and welcome it, in my experience, especially if you're a constituent. They kind of have to if you're a constituent, right? So we, over the course of a year and a bit, had a dozen or more meetings with elected officials and a few folks in the executive branch. And what that, the ask morphed a little bit. Originally, we were writing a bill for carbon dioxide removal funding to say that the state should be buying tons of carbon dioxide removal. And that ended up morphing into something that was even easier to do, which is a budget proviso. And so in the budget that was passed by the Washington State Legislature a couple of weeks ago, and will be signed by the governor in a week or so, we hope, we got up to $32 million allocated to greenhouse gas removal RD&D, as well as clean energy RD&D. And that's a great start, you know, and the pitch that we made to the elected representatives was, we need to do this, right? We need to figure out how to do this amazingly, incredibly hard thing of removing billions of tons of CO2 every year. And B, doing this is going to be a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And the states and territories and regions that invest in that industry and try to help that industry develop in their area are going to be the ones that benefit from it. It's going to be an industry as big as today's oil and gas industry, but it doesn't have to be where any of the oil or gas is, because you can do this anywhere on the planet. And that 1-2 pitch worked really well, and kind of works anywhere, to be honest. If you learn a little bit about the various methods of doing CDR, of which there are many, 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 and you think a little bit about the resources you have in your area, you'll be able to come up with some things that are like, hey, we could do this here. This particular method, whether it's enhanced rock weathering or geological sequestration with DAC or something ocean-based or even forests, whatever it is, right, there will be something in your area that would be a good way to do carbon dioxide removal. And that constitutes the opportunity for economic growth for your region. So it's absolutely a do well by doing good kind of situation. And what politician's not going to love that? Help the climate and create a bunch of jobs. That's great. So we went through that effort here with a bunch of meetings. And, you know, because I was new to it, I thought that this was some, you know, big impossible thing. And it turns out that it's not complicated at all. And if we have a minute, we could talk about how to find your local rep. Would that be all right, Terry?
Absolutely. That was next on our agenda. Thank you.
Cool. All right. So I'm going to share my screen for a second, and I'm going to ask you all to follow along here. You know, AI is big in the news, Chat GPT in particular, as a breakthrough in AI. And so instead of Googling, I'm going to go to Bing has a Chat GPT built in. So I went to Microsoft Bing and I clicked on chat, and go ahead and do that. And I think you may get a little bit more potentially useful or interesting results. And so I'm going to say, how do I find my, now, depending where you are in the world, the words you use next might be state, might be province, might be county, might be regional, whatever it is that you call states. I'm going to say state here. representatives, if I can type. And chug, chug, chug. Anybody who's here in the US is probably going to get these same results. So not the results I was expecting, because those are not the results I got before. But in any case, so let's see, who's my legislature service? There you go. Okay, here's one. I mean, I got, there's many of these different tools. I got a different one last time, but let's try this one. Okay, so I'm gonna put in an address here.
Mike, I think it's for Virginia.
Let's see what happens.
Oh, is this only Virginia? Oh, sorry. Thanks. Let's go back to this. I tested this before.
I'm so sorry. I did this with large groups of people, and I would wind up running across the same issue on occasion.
What's the open states? There we go. Okay. This is the one that sent me to before. Okay. So never mind Bing. If you're in the US, go to openstates.org. If you're not in the US, do the search and find something like this. And in here, I'm going to find my legislators. So now I'm going to do that thing again. Let me open this up. All right, so here you go. I've got in the state of Washington, I have 2 representatives and 1 senator. They're all right here, and there's links to their websites. So I can click right through and find their website. I can find their email address. I can find their phone number. It is not hard to find your local representative. And once you find them, almost all of them are going to have some way to, you can either call them up or they're going to have some way that you can submit an email and request a meeting. And when you request that meeting, you're just going to say, hey, I'm a constituent in your district and I'm worried about climate change. And I've heard about this thing called climate restoration or greenhouse gas removal. And I want to talk to you about it. I want to know what your position is and what plans you have. And what you will probably find when you get that meeting, because you will get a meeting, it may only be 15, 20 minutes on the phone, but it's enough. What you'll probably find is you know more about it than they do. Because they're dealing with thousands of issues, you know, from potholes to, housing to whatever. But that's your opportunity to give them information about it. And in particular, give them information about hope and the fact that we don't have to settle for making things just less bad. We can actually clean up the mess we made, and that's actually an appropriate thing to do. So what we're doing in Pack Clean right now is in each region, in each state, and even in local county and city governments, we are asking for funding like the grant program that we just got to help stimulate the development of a greenhouse gas removal industry. And the next ask is actual procurement. So the state or county or city should be buying enough CDR tons to offset the state or county's own historical footprint. It's a reasonable pledge that a lot of big companies have taken, Microsoft among them, but many others as well have taken this pledge that they will get to net negative emissions by 2030 and remove all of their legacy emissions by 2050. Now, if every unit of government and every business took that same pledge and did it, by 2050, we would be well on our way to climate restoration. And for any given local government or state government, it's not that big an ask if you're only asking them to remove their own operational emissions. So that's my pitch for local action. And it's, I can tell you, like I said, 18 months ago, I'd never done any of this. And 2 weeks ago, we got this provision inserted in Washington law to allocate $32 million to greenhouse gas removal research and development. There you go.
Yay! I think it's good to hear the happy stories. Not only do we have Melanie working almost alone with people that she would mobilize at certain times, to Mike, who had a whole team of people, but there is a way to make it move forward, to get the whole movement to move forward. And if we're talking about restoring the climate, we need to move fast. So it would be nice if everybody on this call felt a little like they can do this too. We can all do the same things that we've seen. And these 3 examples, I think, are perfect examples of every chapter we have. And thank you very much for representing us. I want to take a moment out to share with you guys the UN. I put it in there earlier, the UN Act Now app. I found this to be amazing. It's a little hard to find an action that we can all jump in on because there are international people, if not particularly on this call, they will be listening to this recording. So this UN.org app is super easy to find if you click on the link. I'm going to put the picture in. I'm not used to putting pictures in chat. We'll see how that works. Nope, won't let me. But basically, it's a cheerful picture if you're looking at the page right now. And it's really a relevant action to load this on your phone. I would beg you to load this on your phone, and you'll have actions and activities every day. Today, I learned all, thank you, Mike. You can see Mike, he was showing us. It's today I learned about migratory birds. It took me on a trip with a swallow. It's a little action, but it's big. Sometimes it's advocacy, sometimes it's other things. But if you use this app, it will send you reminders each day to keep up on what's going on. And that's why I love it. I'm a really big believer on daily research, on keeping track of everything that's happening in the CDR world for a reason. It's happening and changing so fast. So I'm going to talk for a moment while I give you a chance to actually try loading it, or at least looking at the site and making sure you've saved it so that you can go through and load it when our call is done. It's wonderful. I've got to tell you, I was surprised at just setting up my profile. By the time I was done, I wouldn't say it was even 5 minutes later, I suddenly had my own carbon footprint. My yearly carbon footprint was calculated for me, which I found to be very moving because we've all talked about it. We all know that we're trying to do things. I'm very glad that I bought my electric car last month because it helped, I'm sure, to beef up my figures and make me look better than I probably was last year. But still, it was wonderful. It was very exciting. So I highly recommend doing this. There's also an American version of this. And usually I'm accustomed to doing these sort of talks and being able to send out the links afterwards. I apologize that they're all in the chat. I would like to tell you what Sally Wells taught me early on in this, that by the little smiley face in your chat, there are some dots to the right. If you click on that, there is a save chat button, but do it at the end of the call so that you can get all these links for yourself. But under normal circumstances, I would have saved them and given them to you at the end of the call. But that's the UN version. There's also a wonderful Climate Action Now link that if you load this app, and for some reason it's fallen off my easy to grab chart, so I'm looking it up real quick right now while we're talking. Climate Action Now has an American version. I don't believe they have any international actions, but I'm sure that there's plenty there for everybody to learn from. This this app too is one that I highly recommend. If you can, if you load both the UN one and the Climate Action Now, even if you're outside the US, I think you will have covered a lot of major understandings and being able to be involved in activities that are helping you to lower the amount of CO2 in the future. But those are the 2 apps that I would highly recommend. Once again, I want to tell you that I found them both to be fun. It's like a little game. With the UN one, I got tons of sparkles just for watching the thing on the swallow. There's something fun about actually being rewarded with a confetti stream. And I'm going to squeeze in a little bit more just because I know that we're going to have an amazing talk from Ashley in a little bit. Ashley Meeke is incredible, and we all need to hear what she has to say. But before that, I would like to give you another simple action that we can all do. It's Obviously, this doesn't work for the out of the US people. I apologize if you're listening on the recording. I'm not meaning to neglect you. But if you're in the US, the Inflation Reduction Act money is out there. And the leaders of the communities that actually sign this pledge, if it's a city, if it's a county, could even be a community. Melanie said she's up in the mountains somewhere. This might be something that even a local official in her zone might go for. But if you click on this, if you're a local leader, if you can get them to pledge, it kind of helps them get to the front of the line on the funding because they'll know what's coming up. So it's worth doing. I've already contacted my mayor, I think 2 weeks ago, to do it. And we all want to make sure that the money winds up in our communities. And this is one little thing you can do that could translate to millions of dollars like Mike did. It's worth trying. And yes, you might have somebody who says, there is no climate change. We don't need it in our community. That's fine. Then start thinking about your state level representatives or think about somebody at a different level. There's got to be somebody somewhere who's wanting to get money into their communities like you do. And I'm going to give you one last one before we go to Ashley and then cut to questions. This is a personal favorite of mine. This is, I think, at one of the Carolinas. If you click on this last link, DSIREUS, to me, it's desire without the E, desireusa.org. If you put in your zip code, it will tell you what your household or your community might qualify for. For my own community, I'm in King County. That's very close to where Mike is. There were at least 57 policies that we qualified for. And so, I mean, it'll take you a little bit of time. You have to actually read what comes up for your community. But isn't it worth it? That's the whole point of advocacy. We can do these things and start getting stuff rolling. It's one thing to talk about just contacting your relatives. Well, you can contact your relatives too, but contacting your representatives. And it's another thing to go through and actually feel like you're doing actions. And I have been knee deep in these actions for the last 3 weeks. And I have to tell you, it's exhilarating to be doing something. So these are the things I've just dived into. I mean, it's come down to little things. I don't know what your area might have as a benefit, but as an example, I live in King County in Washington State, and I wanted to see more electricians have access to funding from the federal level. So I contacted my International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers union leaders, and they're kind of a less than friendly bunch, I'll tell you. But I basically told them that, I want to contact you with more information as it develops on how we can get this money into our community. They favor communities of color. They favor communities where they've been marginalized to the tune of 40%. So it doesn't matter where you are, you can have access to a lot of different things by going into these resources we've given you. I'd like to stop for a moment now and give Ashley a chance to do her story if she is here and ready to go.
Hi, thank you, Terry. Can everyone hear and see me okay? I know Zoom can be a little finicky. Alrighty. Hi, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the forum so far and the workshop so far. I know we're talking about advocacy, and so I just wanted to share a little bit of my own climate story and my journey with advocacy personally. So the first time I personally ever learned of climate restoration was in 2019. It was at the first forum for the Foundation for Climate Restoration. And prior to this, I was made only familiar with the impending doom that our world faced. My high school classes taught me about adaptation for, of course, the devastating climate disasters, and of course, mitigation for corporations that attempted to slow down the Earth's trajectory towards this impending doom that we all seem to face. But F4CR gave me a new perspective on our climate situation. They taught me about a perspective where we can be proactive and take actionable steps that have substantial results. And then I realized that this is the agenda and the future that I want to stand by and live by. I was so inspired by the forum and everything that I was learning from the foundation that I made changes in my own life too. I started monitoring what I consumed and ate and wasted, and even monitored my carbon footprint, as Terry was talking about before. And then I made more environmentally conscious decisions. I also was able to create the Youth Leaders for Climate Restoration program to inspire youth around the world to advocate for climate restoration too. Oftentimes, I know that youth get shut down for being too young or too inexperienced to participate in the climate conversation, but I wanted a way for youth to get the knowledge and experience to feel confident in advocating for our world. Advocating for our world is so important. Advocating for climate restoration is so important to me personally, because one day I soon dream of traveling the world and I want to fully experience all of the Earth's beauty and wonders and preserve it for the rest of us to share. So that's why advocation and advocating is so important to me. And with that being said, let's dive back into the workshop and learn more about advocating and some more ways that we can be productive in our society. So with that being said, over to you, Terry. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was beautifully said, Ashley. Thank you for being here. I also noted in the chat that Mike has another thing that he wanted to point out. Would you like to talk about it for a moment?
Sure. Thanks, Terry. So, what impresses me here is we've talked about many different dimensions of local action, from the personal action to calculate my own footprint and think about doing things a little bit differently, which, by the way, is, I think, about more than, if I do that, it's about more than my own footprint. It's also about just the message that sends and the example that sends. And when people notice that I'm doing something a little bit differently, there's an opportunity to talk about why. And there's an opportunity to maybe influence them to do things a little bit differently. And if we all do things a little bit differently, it can make a big difference. And then we've also talked about influencing local leaders at the state level or city or county level to take action from a policy perspective. And there's one other kind of local action that you could consider, which is to consider whether you might have a career in climate. As I said, this is an industry that today around the world employs maybe 10,000 people max in terms of full-time employment doing carbon dioxide removal or greenhouse gas removal, and it needs to be millions of people. So the growth here is going to be amazing, and there is an opportunity for anybody who's thinking about making a career change to get in on the ground floor of an industry that's going to grow as fast as the internet. And a couple of resources for that, if you're interested, I guess Terry can put these in chat, is an organization called airminers.org that is a group of people who are working on climate tech startups together, and an organization called Climate Base, which is a hub for the climate. It's a jobs board plus a hub for the climate industry. So those are two resources worth checking out if you are considering the possibility of getting into a career where you can wake up every morning feeling great about what you're about to go do. Thanks.
What I like about that is that I turned 60 last week. It doesn't matter. I can still be a leader in this field. That's what's exciting about it. I've been studying only this particular aspect of carbon dioxide removal and climate change for the last several years, but really my degree is in international policy. So what I get excited about is this is a field that's welcoming everybody. So whether you're young or old, whether you're in another country or not, you can really look at this field and just dive in, see what you can do. I do a daily short, and I've been daily researching this for years now. Daily, I pick out what's going on in the news. And what I do is I just Google CDR and see what comes up. Carbon dioxide removal sometimes climate change, but it's always generally in the same motion. And it doesn't take much to be an expert in these fields at this point. You've got to figure that if you know what CDR is, you know more than a lot of people who are actually applying for jobs in the field. I mean, you really do belong in an area where you'll be appreciated, and it doesn't matter how old or young you are. So thank you so
I'd
much.
like to underscore one thing there, Terry, that you said, which is it also doesn't matter. You don't have to be a scientist.
Oh gosh, no,
I
I'm
think
not a scientist. I'm a
people look at this
talker.
and go, well, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know how to do this. But this is an industry. It needs salespeople. It needs accountants. It needs, all kinds of help. It needs pipe fitters and welders and electricians and everybody. So it's going to take a lot of people to do this insanely huge job, and we need to get it done. Consider being part of it.
And really, one more thing. Let's really underscore the idea that it doesn't take much to be an expert at something. You just have to care about it and bother to research it. There's a carbon market that's now unfolding before our very eyes, whether it's voluntary or compliance oriented. These are things that everybody's going to need to know. And just having heard that word, you're already ahead of the game. Well, I think we've covered a lot on that. Let's give you guys a chance to ask questions. Anybody have any questions for us or comments? I love comments. I see Rick has a question. Go ahead, Rick.
Well, I'll get us started.
There we
I'll
go.
break the ice here on the question asking. I'd love to hear a little bit more from well, anyone on the call, but any of the speakers at this workshop in particular. We've heard about your work locally. Can you talk a little bit more about the F4CR community? The community of local chapter leaders, the Wednesday afternoon calls that some of you attend. How have you found that to support your ability to be an effective advocate locally?
Beautiful. I see Melanie has her hand up. You want to answer that, or are we going to ask something else? Sorry.
No, I will respond to that, and maybe Dick and Mike have something as well. Really every step along the way, I have not only did I get the connections that I have for other organizations who have provided resources, I've had a group of people that are working from a very positive perspective. It really is engaging in something that, unlike many other things that I have been a part of over the years, that were fighting against something, this is really about creating the future. And it's very positive. It's a very positive, possibility-based community. And the biggest thing that I'm really out to share with people now, and I get it from the Foundation for Climate Restoration, is just what's possible, and that we can get beyond the cynicism and do something about this together.
One of the things I really like about this is
from the heart, big time.
That's so true. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I wanted to hear every word. It's interesting to me how when I entered this field, I came in from policy, and there can be a lot of competition in the political world. As we all know, we're sick of it. Everybody's sick of it. But what was beautiful is that this particular sector is focused on working together. So it didn't matter that Open Air is doing an amazing job, only it's with volunteers. And we were paid employees. Everybody held hands and ran toward the finish line together. Our concept is not competition in this world. I have rarely run across anybody who cared about competing with another organization inside this sphere. Everybody seems to be working together, and we recognize that we're saving the future. So it's much deeper, richer experience than just the simple competitiveness attitude. And so I agree with Melanie. It's more of a heartfelt thing. It's a perfect expression. Put your hands together like that. That's so sweet. Thank you. I see. Were you done, Melanie? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you did not cut me off.
Okay,
I am. Good. Thank you.
Tim Chamberlain from New Zealand.
Hi, thanks very much. I get, my question is, how are the larger scale sort of, no, this is a statement, I'm just interested to know whether I'm completely offbeat. It seems that some of the larger, really promising initial things that Peter talked about in his book aren't getting much traction, and there's a lot of skepticism around, I don't know, almost for-profit solutions. And I wonder if whether that's true or not, and where, you know, am I partly right? Oh,
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I missed the key part of it.
yeah, perhaps I'll just go off camera because my network bandwidth is saying it's low. So
I thought it was cutting out. I was like, am I missing something? If somebody else heard more and want to respond, go ahead.
my question is, in Peter's book, some of the things that really excited me were the larger scale, for worth, you know, money making potential solutions, and I'm just not hearing much traction for those kind of solutions, and I'm wondering whether I'm right or I'm wrong with that.
Well, actually, the cement solution has been getting a lot of traction, and it's not getting a lot of press for its traction, and that's been surprising to me. But the ocean iron fertilization has been getting a lot of attention as well, but that has to be properly worked through academia channels, and that's not something that happens overnight. But overall, yes, those are really valid and important ones to look at, and they are the big ticket items. But what you'll hear in a lot of carbon dioxide removal sphere talk is that we have to have a portfolio and not a silver bullet. So you'll usually hear a whole series of things that are amazing that are being pushed forward. We can't easily get our governments to say, hey, we want you to only invest in 2 things and expect our governments to go along with it. Mike can do a better explanation of that because we ran into that with Washington state work.
No, I get that totally. And I guess thank you to you all, you know, for the work you do, you know, from your local chapters. I think it's, and Terry, the work that you do, and I've sort of fallen off the radar a bit on my appearances, but I am sort of following from a distance.
I recognized your name. You've been really good. I've sent you the stuff every week, twice a week. You've been there. Mike, did you want to respond a little bit more on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you covered it pretty well, but I can just sort of second what Terry was saying, that the concrete sequestration in concrete is getting a lot of action and a lot of attention and a lot of progress. There's a company called Carbon Built, which whose CEO is right here in Seattle, and you know, they're putting together pilot plants. It takes time to work out the right ways to do this, but they're putting together pilot plants, and they have a great business model. And I fully expect that company to be, you know, basically converting the entire precast concrete industry over a relatively short period of time, maybe a decade, because it makes so much sense that you can save money and make low carbon concrete products at the same time. It's a terrific win-win. And likewise, I can say with regard to ocean iron fertilization that I personally have watched the discussion around that move from these polar sides, we got to do it right away, or no, that's a terrible idea, to a very much meeting in the middle that, hey, we need to actively and expeditiously study this so that we fully understand all of the implications of what it means to trigger a massive algal bloom on purpose. And so that we can make sure that it is A, effective, and B, doesn't have unintended adverse consequences. But I definitely have watched that happen where previously there was dug in resistance, no way, you're never going to even be allowed to try this, to a consensus that we need to do a series of significant scale controlled experiments in multiple locations around the world to be able to measure exactly how this works and watch for any adverse consequences.
So, Mike, where's a really good?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Where is a good place to watch that development? What's a?
So the evolution of that conversation that I've seen is on a couple of lists. There's a Google group. I'll find it in a moment. I'll find it and put it in chat. But there's a Google CDR group that has a lot of activity on it. And then there is a separate ocean CDR community that also puts out a newsletter. And just watching the conversation and sometimes participating in those two channels, I've definitely watched that evolve. And I see a lot of other interesting conversation about new developments, new insights in various other areas as well.
Thanks,
Erica
Mike.
put it in the chat, by the way.
Thanks, Erica.
She's on it. If you're through, Tim, may I go on to Andy?
Yep.
There we go, Andy. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I really appreciated hearing the stories of what you're doing in your communities and these incredible wins that you've accomplished with your action, which I really relate to the concept being long and involved and hard to achieve, but your message is it's really not. And I appreciate all of the grassroots solutions and things you've done to get there. I'm wondering about how you've grown your local chapters. So let's say you choose, okay, I want to start a local chapter. I'd like to stand for climate restoration and share it in my community. How did you advertise it? How did you find people in your community who wanted to join you and participate in these discussions?
I really like what Dick did. Can we go to Dick on that one?
Appreciate the question, Andy. I think it's really critical that we have more grassroots. That's the purpose of F4CR starting the chapter organizations. It's also being done somewhat associated with the CCL model, and that's Citizens Climate Lobby. And they have not achieved their goal, but they've had significant impact. And I believe there's 800 chapters in the United States. Tim, by the way, welcome from the Global South. It used to be not too long ago that it was taboo in the United States to say, to speak about climate restoration, sequestration, because a lot of people thought that would give the oil companies cover to continue business as usual. That has changed significantly since I started my conversations with Terry last fall. So there's this is going to move very fast. But with that, to get local grassroots understanding of the issue is what I see my role is with a local chapter. And what I did, put out a very thoughtful, and we worked very hard on getting the local media to publish an op-ed piece, very, very grassroots. Ask people to send an email or link to a Facebook page. And then what we started doing is having these conversations. And right now we have about 80 people in our database. And we're only, when we say we're, it's primarily myself and someone else who's now on a Disney cruise. But with that, we're getting there. The local population, what I ultimately hope to do is to be able to take the Central New York chapter and merge it with, because Terry and I have talked about it, with other interests here in New York State, and make it broader than just local or regional within the state of New York. But I believe the way to do it is again through the grassroots, to just keep talking to people and have them. We actively say just bring one more person that we can talk to, and we've had families come to some of our meetings. One was led by a young lady that demanded her parents to join her. He was engineer that was a farmer, and all of a sudden he realized that he does. Well, yeah, I do. I miss that connection to the earth that I had, and this is an opportunity for us to return to that place. That's what the conversations are about, and it becomes very attractive to people. There's two other things I'd like to say about that. There are so many environmental organizations out there. We did 2 Earth Fests in different communities in April around, and you go to these things and there's 44 tables of people that are all some type of an environmental group. But F4CR resonates because nobody talks about it, but it becomes almost brutally obvious right away that, yeah, we need to do this. I'm 63. When I was born, the CO2 level was 312 above 280. It's at 420 now. We see the impacts. We have to go back. So all of a sudden people say, yeah, we can do this. And it gives them hope. So I think F4CR will begin to resonate with many people. We just have to talk to as many people as we can. It has to grow. I hate to say it, it has to grow organically before it grows exponentially. But the need is great that we need to get to the exponential part. And that I'm not sure where it's going to go, but we're talking to everybody we can.
Perfect. Thank you, Dick. I see we have a lot of hands up, and I want to point out that it's 4:56, so we're closing in on the end of time. And before we end, I want to remind everybody to go down to that smiley face in the chat section and make sure you save this conversation so you have all those links. I don't know where it'll go on my Mac. It goes into some weird file named Zoom, but Zoom isn't like in a normal place. It's inside of documents, I think, but I don't know where it'll show up for you, but save that conversation. Touch the 3 dots and save chat. I see that Tim has his hand up again.
Unintentionally. I'm not meaning to have my hand up.
Okay, sorry. Andy, go ahead.
Sorry, I forgot to take mine down as well. I'm complete. Thank you.
Okay, Kathleen.
I just wanted to offer some real fun for you guys, some really good news. And that is that there's a quirky little comedy on Netflix that's called Unstable, and it stars Rob Lowe from Wayback Machine. But he is a tech billionaire who's working on climate restoration. And it will blow your mind to hear what he's talking about. I won't give it away, but it is fantastic. Netflix, Unstable. They're actually talking about climate restoration. He's working on a method. It's the theme of the whole first season. And so the word has gotten out, and I'm talking about, learning about climate restoration in 2019 when there was nothing going on, to the point so soon, really, that we're talking about a major show on television talking about just exactly this. So it's good news. It's super good news. Word's getting out.
And also, even though I'm a volunteer now, I'm not a paid employee past Monday, I put my information in the chat. So Andy, you're interested in starting a chapter? I can help you stay in contact with F4CR. I can turn you over to their information. And my job has been to develop the chapters. So I'm sure I can be a resource for you and help you move forward on that. I believe we'll have a part-time employee that I can turn you over to eventually, but that's just so that you're aware. See, we're at 4:59. I believe it's time for us to close it up, but thank you for being here, everybody. We appreciate you.